خب
لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله ما لنا رب سوى لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآل الطيبين الطاهرين. There is a short philosophical discussion here. The great Allama Tabatabai says that there are intellectual arguments to show that the effect has everything from its cause. Therefore, if there is anything good, any perfection, any beauty in the effect, ma'lul, it's for the cause. And then he says something which I want you to reflect. He says praise is to express with your existence perfection of another being. إظهار موجود ما بوجوده كمال موجود آخر. So one being with its very own being, with its very own existence, shows perfection of something else. This is praise. The meaning of praise, or the concept of praise, is this. And then he says that that other being whose perfection is shown is the cause, is illat. So every effect is praising its own cause because it's showing the perfection of its cause. Therefore, in this world, because every perfection comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so every praise goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything which is praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The idea is very clear, but I have a problem with the purpose of making this philosophical point. It's clear that every perfection comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in a more general way, every effect, whatever it has, it's from its cause. And also it is acceptable to say that in a sense, everything is existentially praising its cause. But I don't think this is what we mean by praising when we say Alhamdulillah. Because when we say Alhamdulillah, we don't mean existential praise. Because this praise can be used as a kind of relation between effect and cause, but also we can praise something with which we don't have any causal relation. I can praise you. If you have a good quality, I can praise you. Are you my cause? No. If we say that the whole concept of praise is reduced to this existential praise, so we can only praise God or a cause which is lower than God, because God is the cause of the causes, and there are certain things in between. But we can praise many other things other than God or something which is our cause. I can praise another human being. Or, for example, angels can praise human beings who are mu'min, who are believers. So I don't think there is need to limit everything to this existential type of praising. Although I don't have problem with this, but I'm just saying that we should not limit praise to this. Then Allah proceeds to discuss the verse إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Obviously, the very first thing that we need to address is ibadah. What is ibadah? Allah says ibadah comes from abd. Abd means a slave, someone who is owned by another person. And ibadah means to act like a slave, to be like a servant. This is ibadah. In the case of slaves and their masters, sometimes we have one master for one slave. Sometimes we have more than one master for one slave. Two people can share the same slave, 50% for each of them, for example. Because when there was this idea of slavery, so it was like a good that you can purchase. So maybe two people buy one slave. Or when someone had a slave and he dies, that slave would be inherited by maybe more than one person. In the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one should have any share in his servants. Every servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every abd, entirely is owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is no chance for shirk, there is no chance for polytheism or multiplicity of the mastership. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only master of all his servants. Therefore, the Quran says in Surah Kahf number 110, وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. This doesn't mean that practically every person acts as a servant of God. This is the theoretical or theological understanding. In practice, we have many people who don't belong completely to God. Either they belong completely to the lords, or they have divided themselves into different portions. So they have different masters. They follow God to some extent, but they also follow their own desires and whims. So we have shirk. Shirk is possible, but it is not accepted. Okay? So every person is supposed to be servant of God alone. But in practice, we have people who suffer from shirk. The other thing is istikbar, is to refuse to worship God, to refuse to be a servant of God. About this, Allah says this is something which is not possible, which is not accepted at all. And those who refuse to obey God, refuse to serve God, they cannot be considered a servant of God at all. Those who are mushrik, they associate someone to God, they can be considered as servant, but not full-fledged servant, half servant. But those who are arrogant and they say we don't want to serve God, they are not at all considered as servants. Okay? So this arrogance, this hesitation to serve God does not come together with being a servant. But shirk can be there for many servants of God. Many of the people who serve God at the same time they serve other things. So it is happening. So this is something that I'm sure you have studied. The other thing is about the relation between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His servants in the sense of being blocked, being somehow unable to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a master. This is possible. You know, sometimes, for example, you have a house which belongs to someone. But because you look at the house and you are focused on the house, you forget that this house is owned by someone else. So your knowledge of house would block you thinking about the owner. But if you look at the house as something which is owned by that person, then it leads you to the owner as well. What about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allama Tabatabai seems to suggest that with the case of Allah is different, because everything is really owned by God. So when you look at everything, you come also to notice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you read this paragraph starting with وَلَكِنَّكَ عَرَفْتَ أَنَّ مَا سِوَاهُ تَعَالَى لَيْسَ لَهُ إِلَّا الْمَمْلُوكِيَّةِ وَهَذِهِ حَقِيقَتُهُ فَشَيْءٌ مِّنْهُ فِي الْحَقِيقَةِ لَا يَحْجُبُ عَنْهُ تَعَالَى. So nothing would make a kind of veil, a kind of shield that you cannot then think of God. And therefore he says فَلَهُ تَعَالَى الْحُضُورُ الْمُطْلَقِ. So he has perfect presence. And then he quotes this verse أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. He is witness over everything. So I don't know, have you reflected on this part of this whole paragraph? Are you happy with what Allama says? Because he wants to argue from the fact that Allah is the owner of everything and that He witnesses over everything, that nothing can become a veil, nothing can become a hijab. It's not like a house that you can look at the house and forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
It is like what you said before, that everything has two aspects.
Yeah.
One face is God and the other is the material thing.
Yeah.
But if we just look at the face that is material, surely you don't see God there. So
Yeah.
you can't say this is clear for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is not very clear what Allama says. This is not very reasonable. Because as he said, it is true that everything depends on God. It is true that Allah is witness over everything. But still it is true that we can be sometimes very short-sighted. We may look at the things which are created by God and think that they are independent, and we can forget God. And therefore they can become a veil, they can become hijab. Actually, this happens to many people. Many people, when they look around, they don't find God. They think that these are there. Sometimes we take them for granted. We think that they have been there forever.
The majority also,
Yeah, maybe the majority, or anyway, more or less. But this is something which is, I think, common. So to say that it's impossible to become hijab, to become a veil for Allah, I don't think is clear.
like what you said in Reta,
Yeah.
Maybe Allama wanted to say that if you understand that your owner, real owner is Allah the Almighty, then there's no veil when you are Allah. So you have to understand this relationship.
So,
otherwise,
so it all depends on the viewer, on the observer. If the observer is careful, so when he looks at everything, he finds Allah there. Like what Imam Ali said, ما رأيت شيئا إلا وقد رأيت الله قبله وبعده معه. But there are many people who things are around them and they don't find God. So it very much, I think, depends on your outlook and the way you observe things.
So we can say that there is no way in the things in itself. The way is in our eyes.
Yeah. So you can say that these veils are not fixed, are not necessary, but
no, the things
but these are the things that we can still have. Of course, as I said, it depends on your outlook. So you are creating this veil, not that these things definitely have kept a veil in front of them. This is the veil that we have kept in front of our eyes.
But the things in itself requires that they have no any way. The things in itself.
No,
but
those objects by themselves don't say anything. It depends on the way we look at them. The objects are not deciding for us. We decide. Either we look at them as signs of God, as creatures of God, or we look at them independent from God. This is up to us. They don't force us to think of them as independent from God.
This is a very clear point, but do you think that Allah meant the same thing that you said? Is it possible that Allah didn't notice this?
This is what appears from the text. You look at it, and say, because he says that إنك إذا نظرت إلى دار زيد, when you look at the house of Zayd, it's possible to look at it as a house and forget that there is Zayd. But if you look at it as something which is owned by Zayd, then you don't forget Zayd. But he says, for God, it's only ownership. And therefore, nothing will be under veil. And then he says, وَلَنْ نَظَرُ إِلَيْهِ يُجَامِعُ الْغِفْلَةِ. It's impossible looking at something which is owned by God with having veil. So these two don't come together. But it seems that they can perfectly come together.
Maybe trying to say that if you look at the house, as the example, if you look at the house, you forget Zayd. It's possible that if you concentrate only on the house, you forget Zayd. But if you concentrate only on the creation of Allah, it's not possible to forget Allah.
Why?
Because the concentration on that thing will take you back to Allah, whilst the concentration on the house will not take you to Zayd. There's a difference. So, for example, if I really concentrate on the skies, for example, and I concentrate on the reality of the skies, it will take me to Allah straight.
No, reality of a sky, it means that you are then going towards deeper layers of their existence, and then you find that there is a cause.
Well,
but it's possible to spend tens of years on knowing a skies and deny God.
No, but the example is diametrically opposite. So if you go and as you said, you go in to find out the reality of the sky, and you reach Allah. If you look at the house and you try and find the reality of the house, you'll never come to Zayd.
But you know that this house must have an owner.
Not necessarily. You can.
There is no house without owner.
Well, the owner can't be Zayd. Can be.
But you know that there's an owner.
I think that makes sense because the two are diametrically opposite. On one side, if you look at the reality of a thing, it will take you back to Allah. But if you look at the reality of the house, it will never take you back to Zayd. Or it will take you. It can take you to the house itself.
He doesn't talk about reality of house or reality. He said, إذا نظرت إلى دار زيد.
Nazar means to look at the house.
Yeah. To look at the house of the Zayd,
Like
or to look at the house as property of Zayd. He said there are two ways. One is to look at house. One is to look at house as property of Zayd.
If I look at the house, then I will see. For
So
example,
I am saying the same thing can happen with creation of God. You can look at these stars, these flowers and trees. You can look at them as a property. If you look at them as a property of someone, you come to know God. But if you look at them just as something which is there, you may fail to know God.
No.
Is it clear?
And this is-
There are lots of people who
Many
deny
people have this problem.
that. It's not that.
Excuse me. So this is the problem or matter of observer, not
As I said, it depends on your
yes.
outlook. There is nothing that force you to fail to note and observe God. So you cannot blame these things. Why you have hidden God from me? They say we haven't hidden God from you. You didn't want to go further and discover God.
Alama's not talking about the viewer though. Alama's talking about the act of looking at the house.
Excuse me, but
With the action of looking at the house, you may reach you may not reach Zayd, but the action of looking at the thing, you may reach Allah. So he doesn't talk. The example is not.
He doesn't say you may. He says definitely. This is where I have problem.
Your problem
You know,
is
he
not
says,
the viewer.
لَن نَظَرُ إِلَيْهِ يُجَامِعُ الْغِفْلَةِ. He wants to say that it's impossible to be heedless. And I say, it's possible to be heedless. It's not necessary, but it's possible. Maybe he means something else. Maybe he means that if you look at these things and you think that how they are created, then you come to know God. Okay, if that is the case, then it can be said about the house also, that this house must belong to someone. Anyway, maybe I don't understand.
but regardless to the problem of viewer saying that the materials by itself, naturally when the observer look at material or house as an example that you said, everything by itself naturally leads us to its owner, to its creation. Naturally. But so there
What
is
do you mean
no-
naturally?
I mean naturally.
In the fitra.
Reasonably,
Yes.
essentially.
No. I mean that if there is, if we imagine that there is no way over the eyes of viewer or observer, materials by itself, everything shows its owner, its creator, but
Shows, what does it mean shows?
leads
Leads, if you
automatically.
if you ask for guidance, they will lead you. But if you are a person who doesn't think about these issues, it's not that they are speaking to
He's
you.
talking
No,
about
no,
someone
no,
who thinks
no.
about these issues.
If even in that person, if doesn't have any problem with its heart or eyes, because there is a problem with himself, observer.
So there are people who can observe their relation with God, and there are people who don't pay attention
But
to this.
everything material is a good manifestation of Allah. Everything. You cannot understand what.
It's a manifestation for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the people who, and this is why the Quran says, for example, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, or for example, لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. These are signs, but for the people who think. Okay? Because to be a sign needs also attention. If we don't pay attention, they cannot serve as signs.
Sorry, forgive talking.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I still think Alama's right, and you're coming from a perspective of the viewer, whilst Alama's talking about the action of looking self. For example, if we say that the viewer is without veils, okay, it's one who's looking for the truth. If he looks at the house, it's looking at the house does not take him. The action of looking at the house does not take him to Zayd. It's not because I see a house straight away will take me to the owner. I'll look at the house, I'll see the bricks, etc., etc. But the action of looking at the samawat or the ayat of Allah necessarily takes me to Allah, because the ownership is just a concept that is in the mind, whilst the relationship between the things that are owned in Allah is not something in the mind, it's a reality of ownership. So looking at that as
So do you think everyone who looks at stars is
No.
automatically thinking of being owned by someone else?
No, it's regardless of who looks at it. The Allama is not talking about who looks at it. Allama is looking at the concept of looking.
Okay.
I think, for example, the Quran talks about the concept of looking, look at the stars, etc. In the same way, if you look at an object, it won't take you to the owner of the dunyawi owner kind of thing, which is the contract I make with the house. That's the point we're trying to make.
No, the question is, if you look at these things, do you necessarily think about their owner? Or it's possible to look at them and don't think at all about whether they are owned or not, who is their owner. It's not necessary that everyone who looks at these things think about ownership. You know, you take this for granted that definitely they think about their ownership.
Fine. So is it necessary that someone who's pure in his heart, if he looks at a house, is it necessary they will straight away take him to Zayd? No.
No.
So, but the opposite works. If someone is pure, he looks at the samawat, it will definitely take him to Allah.
Because he thinks about ownership.
But even if he thinks about ownership of the house, necessarily doesn't take him to Ziyad. Because Ziyad doesn't really own the house.
No. Here we don't need purity. Here we need, sharpness in your vision.
So with sharpness of vision, looking at the house will take you to Ziyad.
Yes. You realize that there must be an owner.
Excuse me. May I say something? I think there is something here that might be a solution for this problem. Allah has a principle, a basic principle that says the existence of God doesn't need any proof. This is one of the basic principles of Allah. Says all the reasons that we bring for the existence of God or only for some kind, all of them have a problem because all of them are going to prove something which is self-evident. So Allah doesn't accept them in one meaning. And this is based on a philosophical meaning that no
Effect.
No effect can be unaware of its cause. So I think this makes it.
No. First of all, it's not very clear that he wants to say this because he brings himself arguments for the existence of God.
Okay,
but even if he says that, at least, even for those things which are self-evident, at least you need attention.
Okay, he says that
there can be something self-evident, but if you don't pay attention, you don't realize.
Even those people who who don't realize it at the beginning, if they think deeply, if they think and in the deeper layers of their existence, they have this.
If they think.
So, even if they don't think, they have it in the deeper layers of their existence.
But to become an active knowledge and recognition, they must think about it. They must bother about it. But if someone doesn't bother at all, then this becomes hijab.
But there are a lot of people, they think about it and they pay attention and they try to bring lots of proofs that there is no God. They pay attention and they consider it the point of ownership and they try to prove there is no God.
Yeah.
I think that Allah here wants to make difference between real owners and unreal owners. We suppose that the observer is Imam Ali himself. Imam Ali can ignore, can see the house and ignore its owner, because in this case the ownership is unreal. But Imam Ali cannot observe anything and doesn't see Allah because Allah is the real owner of
that is another issue. That is something which is obvious, that in the case of house there is no real ownership, so it can be a house without owner at all. Here there is ownership. That is not the main thing. No, he wants to use this to say that therefore when you look at the thing which have real owners, it's impossible to become veil. I have problem with this part. I accept that the ownership in the case of house is not real. And in the case of Allah is real. I accept that. But my problem is that you cannot use this as a proof to say then it's impossible for us to look at something which is really owned and forget God. I say it's possible. And many people actually have done this.
He's talking about unconscious mind, not what we see in the appearance. It's talking about the unconscious mind that every person, even if he doesn't show to know that, he has it in his unconscious mind.
Excuse me,
But this is not true about the.
He has in unconscious mind is problematic. What do you mean by unconscious mind? Yeah, what do you mean by this? Because we are talking about knowledge of God. You know, once I had a discussion with someone,
This is some kind of knowledge.
and he was saying that every kafir also has unconscious level knowledge of God. So I said, if you say like this, then there is no kafir. But this is not enough to have unconscious knowledge of God. You have to have conscious knowledge of God. If you say everyone is worshipping God, even the idol worshippers are worshipping God, they just make mistakes. Okay, that is acceptable. But this is not enough to make them a believer in God. We need conscious knowledge of God.
So maybe we can say that this is based on the principle of Allama about unconscious mind, but you don't accept that principle, that basic principle.
I don't know if Allama has such a principle as you say.
Yes, Allama says that, you know, the existence of God is self-evident and we don't need any proof, but all the proofs that come are problematic because you are trying to prove something which is self-evident. And
So does Allama say that it's enough to have something you're unconscious and you don't need even to bring some arguments to make it?
I think.
So I'm not sure whether he wants to make this, kind
But
of
anyway, if we
conclusion.
have that basic principle, this makes it meaningful to have this interpretation for this verse.
Yeah.
Excuse me. A question.
And it's interesting that he himself later says, وَإِذَا كَانَ كَذَلِكَ فَحَقُّ عِبَادَتِهِ تَعَالَى أَنْ يَكُونَ حُضُورٌ مِنَ الْجَانِبَيْنِ. I think this is also supporting our argument. Because it says حَقُّ عِبَادَتِهِ, means it's better, it's something which is, expected. Initially he talks as if this is necessary. But then he says it's better, it's appropriate. So it means that if we have proper outlook, if we have proper treatment, we should have this understanding.
There is an evidence
Because it says فَحَقُّ عِبَادَتِهِ. It means that this is not necessary.
There is an evidence that Allama means this one. He means a person who has, he knows, he pays attention to what he's seeing. There is an evidence here. I think in the rest of that, ثم إن الملك يكون متعلق بالوجود بمالكه كما عرف. And then he says وإن نظرت إليها بما أنها ملك زيد لم يمكنك الغفلة عن ملكها وهو زيد. So I think this sentence shows that if he looks with conscious, if he looks with paying attention to that this belongs to God, he has that.
So what is the difference between house and
The difference is that house
a star
can have other owners, but about the stars and the universe, and the other things cannot have any other. So if a person have a proper look at the other things, he will certainly lead to God. But about the house, maybe not, because a house can have other owners.
No. If you look at house and you know that this is property of someone, then you cannot forget the owner.
Right.
Okay, so the same is about stars. If you look at them and consider that they are owned by someone, then you come to know God. But if you look at them and then become busy with them, so you don't think of God.
Maybe we can differentiate this way, that we can say about the house, we might make a mistake in understanding the owner, but about the other
Yeah, of course, there are many things that you can say, but this is the point. There are many, many differences. We are not saying that they are from every aspect the same. The only thing that I am trying to say is that it's possible, even when there is real ownership, to become heedless. This is what I am saying.
It could be like what Allama Jawadi says about the verse, Allama says this is mashhud, means God is witnessed in everything. Whatever you look at, you can see God there. But it's good stuff for all people. It means a kind of purity. And this can solve the problem that this, just like we said, it's for some special people. God is everywhere, but it depends on the person, the visitor, that he is able to see or not. Behold, that is important.
Excuse me, question. Is it possible to look at something material and at the same time do not confess that this material or everything comes to existence by a creator? For example, looking at instruction, a house. This is possible because I think the word term owner or ownership is a little bit controversial. Does it imply the being owner of something implies that the owner is its creator or its instructor of something? For example, you said Zayd as the owner of house, looking at his house, at the same time automatically taking us to the owner. Of course, I mean, I want to say that yes, even without thinking, the process of thinking, if the owner implies that its owner is its creator, is its instructor, yes, of course, automatically taking us and leading us to the creator and instructor of something, because material cannot come to existence by accident.
Yeah, these are arguments that you are making. So it's not something that someone automatically and necessarily thinks about. You know, there are many people who go to jungle and they just enjoy being in jungle. They don't, say, oh, these are signs of God, let's, glorify God,
No, I don't want to confess on God, but at least it's creator. Even a tree.
They don't think about being created.
So it might be completely.
Indeed, Ayatollah Jawadi says the problem with modern science is that they study these, different things without thinking of creation. When they study human body, or when they study, for example, stars, they don't take it as a creation. And he says, if you want to change and Islamize, we have to study everything as creation of God. So it means that it's possible to look at these things without thinking of being creation of God.
So in this view, accident is possible.
No, they don't think about it. I'm not saying that it's possible to be created by chance, but I'm saying they don't bother to think about this. And even some of them say, yes, it's possible. There are people who say it's possible. There are people who don't think about it at all.
Excuse me. I think Allah here wants to speak about this verse according to a philosophical principle that they have in Hikmat Mutawaliyah, that all things, all mumkin al-wujud is I don't know, ain or wrapped to relation to the God. So the reality of all things is not except relation. So if anyone can look at the reality,
so everyone has this outlook.
No. If anyone
even in philosophy, before Mullah Sadr, they didn't have this view.
I know.
So how can you say?
No.
After
I say.
Anyway, this is based on the.
If someone, sorry, let me complete my explanation. If someone can look at the reality of something, because the reality of something, anything, is not except relation to God and mamlukiyah.
What do you mean?
So
look at reality.
If
I just look at this orange.
Okay. This is not the.
I am looking at this orange or not? You say no. You are not looking at the reality of orange.
You just.
I am looking at this orange and spend all my life about physical, chemical aspect of orange. It's possible.
Okay, but these physical aspects of orange is not its reality, and this is not the Mamlukiya and relation.
Okay, so you want to say that if you look at this orange from that perspective, then you come to know God. And this is what I said at the beginning. You don't need even to bring Mullah Sada's idea.
The real knowledge about anything is this.
That is okay. So that is proper.
Yeah.
So you can say it's a proper way of looking at orange. I don't have problem with that. But I'm saying that this is not something that automatically happens to everyone. Yes, this is a proper. Okay, we don't have any problem.
What is your idea of the philosophical principle?
Was not said to
That
say
every cause is interact with its, every effect is interact with cause, and this relation is one of its aspects is means knowledge. So every effect knows its cause. This is a philosophical principle, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
After Mullah Sadra, the philosophers agree on this principle that they say
So even this desk has knowledge of its cause?
Yes, according to the Mullah Sadra, yes, it has. Yes,
No, if it is mujarrad, not if it is material.
He
كل
said that
عاقل و مجرد. If it's not abstract, it doesn't have knowledge.
okay, it has some abstract aspect. It has some kind of knowledge.
So this is a new philosophy.
No, this is the philosophy of Mullah Sadra.
Okay, so let's continue this, and then inshallah there will be opportunities.
If we don't accept this, how do we want to explain
that is another dimension. Everything has two dimensions.
Okay, this is what I said.
From this dimension, from this worldly dimension, it's not that everything is praising God.
Okay, so this is what I say. I say even this desk.
No,
has another dimension, which has knowledge.
You are sorry. You are mixing these two aspects. Like many philosophers have done this problem. I think this is a mistake that has happened, that they don't distinguish between these two aspects, and what is true about one aspect, they extend it to the other. For example, we know that everything is glorifying God, everything has life, everything loves God. But this is from that face which is oriented towards God. Not from the worldly aspect. From the worldly aspect, this has no understanding, no life. Even the Quran itself divides things into dead and alive. Doesn't make sense to say this understands, or this has life, or this has love.
How do you want to say that this is from worldly aspect? I say that Allah is talking about the divine aspect, and the aspect that has knowledge.
Okay, so as soon as you say this is divine aspect, so it means that it is one aspect.
Okay.
Why he says لا يجامع الغفلة? He wants to say it's necessary.
In this aspect, it is not possible.
Maybe here something is, a problem with the text. Maybe, for example, take text like this. لكنك إذا عرفت, for example. If you add إذا, everything is correct. That if you look at this from this perspective, with this understanding, because even he himself later says فَحَقُّ عِبَادَتِهِ. It means that this is the proper way, not that everyone. In any case, that is another issue that we can sometime, explore it more. That what does it mean that everything is praising God or glorifying? And then when it comes from Allah's point of view, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is present. So Allah is present, and the servant of Allah also must be there with present heart. You must not worship God while you are busy with something else. And Allah says that there are people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they are busy either completely or partly with other things. For example, he says, there are people who worship God, but their interest is in something else. Their concern is something else. Or even he says, there are people who worship God, but they want heaven. Or they have fear of hell. He says this is also shirk. if you worship God to get into heaven, or if you worship God so that you don't go to hell, this is shirk. Of course, this is hidden shirk. This is hidden polytheism, but still, this is not good. We should not worship God for the sake of heaven or for being saved from hell. So, we need to have presence of our heart, and also we need to know that God is also present. You shouldn't worship God as someone who is absent. God is present. So we must realize that God is very much present. And Allama says this is why then we have shifted from the third person, the third party, into second. We say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, because now we know that God is present. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. So God is not absent.
But in other hadith, worshipping God for fearing hell or for heaven is counted as a type of ibadah, worship.
Yeah. It's ibadah, but ibadah with a little shirk. Ibadatul Tujjar, Ibadatul Abid. But Ibadatul Ahrar is the ibadah of someone who worships God because he finds God worthy of being worshipped. Okay, the other thing that Allama Tabatabai says is that when you say I am worshipping you and I am obeying you, there is a problem here that it's as if you are too much concerned about yourself. So to avoid that, he says we use na'budu, the plural form, so that I don't become too individualistic. I don't say iyyaka a'bud, I say iyyaka na'bud, so that I am not very much selfish or very much individualistic in my view. And this is something interesting. But as I said before in one of previous sessions, I think, of course, this can be true, but maybe another reason is also that in Islam, the community is very important. And the reason that we use plural form is because Allah wants to tell us that you must always think of yourself as a member of a community. Okay? So you speak on behalf of your people, on behalf of your nation. And this is why we say in every salat, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, even if you are doing this individually. Or Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah as-salihin. So perhaps this is another reason for using plural form, not just because if I say iyyaka a'bud, it becomes selfish or individualistic.
Is it possible to know that the Prophet's salah, when he says iyyaka na'budu, he talks on our behalf as well?
The Prophet or also anyone else. It's not only for the Prophet. And also this has this capacity that if for any reason there is a problem in some of us, still because there are people in our community like the imams and holy people that they do this, so it's still true to say this. If I say iyyaka na'bud and I only mean myself, you may say you are a liar. If I say iyyaka nasta'in and I mean just myself, or even I mean people like me, it's a lie. But when we say iyyaka na'bud, we mean the whole community, including the imam and the prophet. Then this is acceptable. Because we can say as a community, we are only worshiping God. But not every person is doing this perfectly.
Sorry, and what about the vice versa? I mean, suppose that there is no worshipper except one. How he can say that إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ?
If he is the leader, he can say this.
Why?
Because he speaks on behalf of the community.
That there is no worshipper except him. And even about us, how we can confess about from other people. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ means
You
that
represent.
me and
You speak as a representative. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ or اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. As a representative, you request from Allah to guide.
So, but how is it in the first case? That suppose that there is no worshipper except one, for example, the Prophet. How he can say that?
No, it's not only one person. It's always many. There are always good people, good mu'mineen. It's not that only we have one ma'soom and everyone is corrupt. In every generation, there are ulama rabbani, there are holy people, pure people.
So if you be one person, you should say you cannot say even it is imam, because you should guide, you should train the people.
Yeah, but he says that it could be like, for example, a lie. If only one person is worshiping God alone, to say that we do this. I said this is not a lie, because first of all, you are speaking as a representative. And second, because there is always more than one person. It's not that only one person is good and everyone else is corrupt. Okay. When is the time for azan?
So, so why, when it comes to tashahhud, we say to ashhadu and not use the opposite, or use mufrad, singular?
Because in Islam, at the same time that we emphasize on community, we don't forget individuals. We are not communist, you know.
Of course, but besides that, what is the...
That is enough. You don't...
But
Yeah. And this is beautiful, that you are conscious member of community. Not that you forget yourself and are heedless of yourself. Conscious part of the community.
But it could be vice versa.
Pardon?
It could be vice versa. For example, say, إياك أعبد وإياك أستعين. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
When you find that,
So this is not. So
Then this is not good. If I say إياك أعبد, then it can be a lie. But if I say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, it's something that every Muslim to become a Muslim says this. It's very different. Can you say إياك أعبد وإياك أستعين? No. But you can say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
إياك أعبد means that I want to.
No, I want to is different. You don't say أريد أن أعبدك وحدك ولكن لا أستطيع.
Okay, but in this case, just one can say this phrase in good manner and in reality. Just Prophet can say.
No. As a community, we are speaking as a community. Okay, let me just finish this last paragraph.
I think it's better to say that all of these are totally good. And we don't find the reason of when...
We said it can be, but this is a good thing to say. It makes it understandable, but we don't say definitely this is the reason. But this is something which makes sense. Because we have to reflect.
Yeah.
This quite makes sense. Okay, so Allama says that when we speak with this plural language, then he says it's helping us to forget a little bit about ourselves. And then he says, وَقَدْ ظَهَرَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ كُلِّهِ. From everything that we said, it becomes clear that when we say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ, there is no problem at all about the meaning, about the purity of intention. And therefore, he says, so that no one thinks that we don't have any problem, we also say إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, so that we make sure that it's not misunderstood, that we don't need any help, everything is perfect. So we say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ, but also to avoid any claim or any misunderstanding that we are claiming independence, we say also إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. It means that even for our worship, we need your assistance. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. Means even in our worship, we need your assistance. And he says, perhaps this is why we have mentioned both of them. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. We don't say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ أَإِنَّا وَحْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ. He says, maybe we don't say أَإِنَّا وَحْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ because we want to make sure that our ibadah is not understood in the way that we are suggesting we are independent. Even for our ibadah, we need assistance from God. When we say this, then we say, okay, now, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Okay, then Allama says, with this, we have answered many questions. Why we have shifted from the third party to the second party, why we have brought إِيَّاكَ in front of نَعْبُدُ وَنَسْتَعِينَ to show exclusiveness, why we have not limited ibadah to some areas of life. We don't say نَعْبُدُ with respect to some area, it's general. And also why we have used plural form, why we have said إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ together. So he says these are the points that we have mentioned, and there are other points that other people have added to this, but it's enough for us. So inshallah on Monday we will continue with اهدنا الصراط المستقيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. Last session for me, but not for you. So inshallah you should continue. I will tell you, you should yourself, every session someone comes and leads the group.